When she delivered her baby, her deceitful husband outright refused to acknowledge the birth record. "That mistake is garbage. She doesn't deserve my family name," he screamed, degrading her before his entire wealthy family. He went white and started shaking, though, when the physician revealed the truth. They say the cruelest kind of suffering isn't bodily. It's the type that destroys you inside while everyone watches, criticizes, and celebrates your destruction, and that was precisely what Mary experienced. Mary was 29 years old. She worked at a small neighborhood library in the center of the historic Garden District of New Orleans, Louisiana. Mary had always been a reserved woman, quiet, somewhat shy, but with a kind nature that could brighten any space. Despite her modest background, she gained the respect of everyone she encountered through her commitment, her integrity, and her curious tendency of speaking gently as if she didn't want to disturb anyone. She fell for Brandon Wells when she was just 25. He, the successor to a distinguished family recognized for their heritage in commercial development and charitable work in the region, entered her world like a storm disguised as a gentle wind. Brandon carried himself with assurance, displayed a brilliant smile, and communicated in phrases that felt like lasting commitments. Commitments that with time transformed into warnings hidden by quietness. That municipal hospital, with its odor of inexpensive cleanser and the sound of newborns wailing, became the location for a catastrophe no one anticipated. Mary had been in delivery for more than 9 hours by herself, her fingers gripping the linens, her spirit in fragments. Her grandmother, who was fighting a chronic condition, couldn't be present. Her companions from the community couldn't manage the lengthy journey. And Brandon showed up when everything was already finished. The space was confined with marked walls and a harsh white illumination that stung the vision. Mary cradled her infant, her own eyes still puffy from weeping so much. When the entrance opened, Brandon walked in, clothed in luxury apparel, his hair flawlessly arranged, appearing as if he'd recently attended a formal event. Behind him were his mother, Mrs. Victoria Montgomery, with a superior stare and an expression of complete disdain, and his younger brother, Kyle, who gazed at Mary as if she were an insect crawling across the imported carpet in their library. "You're delayed," Mary whispered, scarcely having the energy to talk, holding the tiny infant in her embrace. Brandon didn't reply. He took one stride, then another, until his vision settled on the child. He halted suddenly, his forehead creasing. Something in his expression altered. It was no longer merely discomfort, it was frigid, deliberate, toxic fury. "What is this?" he said, not elevating his tone, but with a force that froze the atmosphere in the space. Mary gazed at him, bewildered. "It's your daughter, Brandon." "Our daughters." Mrs. Victoria progressed with purposeful movements and stationed herself beside her son. She examined Brandon, then at the infant, her mouth twisted with revulsion. "That is not a Montgomery." Kyle released a brief, anxious, ridiculing chuckle. "Mary, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." Mary started trembling. "The baby is yours, Brandon." But Brandon was no longer hearing her. He rotated toward the attendant, who had just arrived to verify the vital indicators. "I need to consult with the hospital director. I decline to authorize any birth record. That mistake will not bear my name." The phrases descended like blades into Mary's being. The attendant, clearly uneasy, attempted to exit the space. Mary clung to the infant, her vision brimming with moisture, not from the public degradation, but from the suffering that expanded in her torso like a device about to detonate. "How can you utter that? She is your daughter, Brandon." "Look at me, please," she implored, her tone fractured. Brandon regarded her for the initial moment since he had arrived, but not as a spouse, as if she were a total outsider. "Do you believe I'm foolish? That infant resembles nothing like me. Do you assume I'm going to carry the weight of an error that isn't even mine? She is not an error. She is your daughter." "Don't elevate your tone at me," he yelled, indicating his finger at her. "What you committed is inexcusable. You have no concept what you've just triggered." Mrs. Victoria folded her limbs and neared Mary with a gaze full of scorn. "I constantly understood you were a social climber, a disadvantaged girl seeking to ascend the hierarchy with a swollen abdomen. And observe you now. You don't even understand who the father is." "Be silent," Mary screamed, quaking with rage. "You have no concept what you're discussing." Don't you address my mother like that." Brandon struck his palm against the partition. "And you, Mary, what you committed is not excusable. You interfered with my family." The infant commenced wailing a piercing lament, as if detecting the strain, as if recognizing something was profoundly incorrect in that location. Mary rocked her, attempting to calm her while she was disintegrating internally. The commotion attracted a physician, who arrived with a concerned countenance. It was Dr. Hassan, the supervising doctor for the delivery, tall with graying hair at the temples and weary vision. He paused when he witnessed the scenario. "Is everything satisfactory here?" "Of course not," Brandon retorted. "This woman is attributing an infant to me that isn't mine. I demand verification. I will not permit a fraudulent paternity to be assigned to me." The physician examined Mary, then at the infant. He lingered for an extended period. He inhaled deeply. "Mr. Wells, I require to communicate with you confidentially. I have nothing to examine. I'm transparent. That infant isn't mine. I have no concern in hearing more." "Please," the physician persisted. "It's significant." Brandon disregarded him, folded his limbs, and rotated to his mother. "We're departing. Let her manage her own difficulty." Mary attempted to rise, but the post-delivery discomfort made her collapse back onto the mattress. "Don't depart. Please hear me. Brandon." "Mrs. Victoria neared one final moment. "I anticipate you have a satisfactory narrative to inform that infant when she inquires who her father was." And they departed. Kyle cast one final glance at Mary, neither compassion nor animosity. "Just vacancy." The physician sealed the entrance gently and approached the mattress. "Mary," the physician said, reducing his tone, "you require to be resilient. What I am about to inform you is not simple." She elevated her countenance, soaked with moisture. "What is it?" The physician hesitated. He examined the infant, then returned at her. The explanation why Brandon detected something unusual is logical. The infant has a genetic anomaly that is not aligned with his, but also not aligned with yours. Mary blinked, bewildered. "What are you stating?" "We require to conduct more examinations, but Mary, the child's father, seems to be someone proximate to Brandon." "Extremely proximate." Mary creased her forehead. Her pulse missed a rhythm. "No, that can't be. I was not with anyone else. Never." The physician stood awkwardly and moved toward the entrance. "I will inform you with more certainty as soon as I have the laboratory outcomes. For now, recuperate. You'll require it." He departed the space. Mary was abandoned alone in quietness. The infant's wails diminished. The discomfort in her abdomen was tolerable, but what was in her spirit was another type of injury, one that had no designation, no remedy, and no conclusion yet. She didn't understand that torment was merely commencing. She couldn't envision that the reality she was about to uncover was more terrible than any falsehood. Mary couldn't move. She felt as if the entire burden of the universe had collapsed onto her torso. The quietness in the space was so dense you could slice it with a breath. The physician was departed. Brandon had deserted her, and her daughter's little area rested on her torso with the purity of someone who hasn't yet experienced scorn. Hours dragged like phantoms pulling on in the dawn. Mary didn't shut her vision once. She gazed at the surface, incapable to grasp what had just occurred. She repeated continuously that it couldn't be accurate, that it was all a terror, that the suffering would cease. But it wouldn't. The suffering adhered to her torso like a corroded blade. And the most terrible aspect wasn't the degradation, it was the uncertainty. The physician's phrases reverberated in her consciousness like a damned sound. An incompatible genetic anomaly. How could that be? She had never been disloyal to Brandon. Not a single look, not a single contact with another male. Never. And yet there was her daughter being dismissed by everyone, even by her own father or the male she believed was her father. At sunrise, the attendant arrived with a fatigued countenance. She transported a platter with morning meal and a document. "Mary, honey, you require to authorize this documentation for release. Do you have someone who can arrive pick you up?" Mary shook her skull. "No, I don't have anyone." The attendant exhaled with that silent empathy that only those who have observed too many catastrophes possess. "You can remain a few more hours, but the hospital is limited on mattresses. You'll have to depart when you can." Mary nodded, then examined her daughter. I don't have anywhere to transport her. 3 days afterward, she returned to the small community where she had matured. Unpaved streets, metal rooftops, the odor of moisture, and basic Creole cooking aromas filling the atmosphere with sentiment. The inherited dwelling from her grandmother awaited her in deterioration with fractured panes and no operational plumbing. Mary arrived with area in her limbs and inhaled deeply. It wasn't a palace, but at minimum, no one would criticize her in here. She contemplated weeping, but she had no moisture remaining. In the Montgomery estate, meanwhile, everything was strained. Brandon had contacted Dr. Hassan to require and clarification. What do you signify by incompatible? Clarify yourself transparently, he required, moving his office with a tumbler of whiskey in his palm and his vision blazing. The physician on the device remained composed. Mr. Wells, as I clarified at the facility, we identified an uncommon genetic anomaly. It corresponds a relative of yours, but not you. Are you indicating it was someone in my family? I cannot make declarations without verification. I recommend a DNA examination as soon as feasible. Brandon disconnected without replying. He then examined out the paint. His countenance contracted. He commenced to distrust the driver, who constantly smiled excessively. The groundskeeper who once inquired about Mary in a curious manner. Even his own younger brother, Kyle, a 22-year-old who expended too much duration at the dwelling when he wasn't present. Mrs. Victoria entered at that instant, sophisticated with that atmosphere of superiority she never discarded, not even for slumber. Well, I'm organizing a DNA examination. I desire to conclude this. That woman I constantly understood she wasn't dependable. It displayed in her garments, in the manner she conversed. That type of woman only functions to destroy a respectable designation. Brandon tightened his hands. I desire all the personnel examined. Everyone. I will not permit anyone to stain my designation. Meanwhile, Mary was attempting to endure. She had no formula for the infant, no absorbent materials, and her financial account had been suspended. Brandon had severed her from everything, even the medical coverage. She proceeded to the community corner establishment to request credit, but no one would assist her. Mary, I'm regretful, but you already are indebted to me from previous month, and with what individuals are stating about you, I'd prefer not get engaged in difficulty, the establishment proprietor said, examining downward. Mary departed the enterprise with her pride in fragments. But just as she traversed the avenue corner, an elderly woman contacted her from the entrance of a dwelling with corroded metal barriers. Hey, Mary, arrive here, child. Arrive on in. You and your infant appear like you haven't consumed. It was Mrs. Josephine, a lifelong resident, a widow, and mother of 9 adult offspring who no longer resided with her. She received Mary with a mug of warm tea, some rigid bread, and a gaze of genuine affection that Mary hadn't received in an extended duration. I don't comprehend what you committed, but whatever it is, that infant ain't to fault, and you require some assistance. Mary collapsed in moisture for the initial moment since departing the hospital. She wept like a tiny infant. She lamented over the timber surface with area resting on her thigh and Mrs. Josephine caressing her hair. I don't comprehend, she whispered through weeping. I pledged to the Creator I wasn't with anyone else. I don't comprehend what's occurring. That evening when she attempted to rest, she had a clouded recollection, a transient, piercing vision, a tumbler of wine, a peculiar vertigo. Brandon wasn't present. She only recalled being in the dwelling. Then everything was a haze. She attempted to recollect more, but the feeling was like a strangled scream. Something didn't calculate. The following day, remarks detonated on social platforms. Someone had disclosed a photograph of Brandon departing the hospital with his mother in breath. The caption stated, "Multimillionaire dismisses his own daughter at delivery, perspectives were separated. Some protected him, others executed him, but everyone was conversing." The media commenced to investigate around. A young correspondent, Tasha Brown, located Mary down. She knocked on Mrs. Josephine's entrance 2 days afterward. Are you Mary's? Mary hesitated, but nodded. I desire to inform your narrative, but only if you desire me to. The nation merits to comprehend the reality. Mary didn't reply. She examined at her daughter. The universe was merciless, but maybe informing her narrative was the only method to protect her. In the Montgomery estate, Brandon received the DNA examination outcomes. He was alone. He unsealed the packet with quaking palms and examined it. He halted, examined it again. Negative. The infant was not his. He felt as if something inside him had splintered. It wasn't sorrow, it was rage. Raw fury. He contacted his legal representative and requested him to eliminate the provisional birth record they had initiated. "That infant is deceased to me," he said, casting the packet into the fireplace blaze. Hours afterward, in a sophisticated lounge in downtown Baton Rouge, Brandon was chuckling with a young, flawlessly composed brunette woman named Jasmine. He was at a gathering of administrators. No one referenced Mary. No one referenced area, just beverages, fraudulent chuckling, and bodies attempting to occupy vacant spaces. Meanwhile, Mary commenced her employment pursuit. With area in her limbs and a curriculum stained by gossip, she examined offices, bakeries, and establishments. Everyone stated the same thing. "I'm regretful, we're not employing." Evening descended. She returned dwelling fatigued. Her feet expanded with nothing more than a sack of rice that Mrs. Josephine had provided her. As she arrived, she discovered an unsigned correspondence slipped beneath the entrance. It only stated, "He wasn't the only one in that dwelling who examined at you differently." Mary felt a chill. She examined at her daughter, embraced her tight, then sealed the entrance and attracted the drapes. There were too many phantoms surrounding her narrative, and she was merely commencing to comprehend that behind every quietness lay a secret. Mary hadn't rested peacefully since receiving that anonymous correspondence. The phrase reverberated in her consciousness like a curse. "He wasn't the only one in that dwelling who examined at you differently." She felt terror, real terror, not of phantoms or superstitions, but of what she recalled and what she didn't, of what might have occurred that evening when everything became a haze. And the following days were shrouded in quietness. The infant commenced to wail. Mary cradled her tight. Aria was only a few weeks aged, but her vision seemed to examine with the force of someone who had already existed 1,000 existences. She caressed her hair and sang gently. Then she sat on the border of the fractured mattress in that borrowed dwelling, Mrs. Josephine's residence, now her only refuge. The universe had abandoned her alone. But duration didn't halt. Neither did starvation. That very evening, she made a determination. She proceeded out with Aria wrapped in a slender covering, traversed through the community with her skull elevated high, and proceeded straight to an office structure in the industrial zone. The location smelled of aged perspiration and inexpensive disinfectant. She inquired for the sanitation supervisor. "I require an employment. Anything. I only request that you permit me transport my daughter with me." The supervisor examined at her suspiciously. "This isn't a childcare facility. She won't disturb anyone. She'll rest in a corner. I just require a chance." The woman exhaled. She was fatigued and required someone urgently. "All right, but if she wails too much, you're departed. I don't desire difficulty." That evening, Mary mopped marble surfaces with expanded palms. Aria rested in a carton with a folded fabric as a cushion. Every moment she finished pushing the mop, she rushed over to verify that she was breathing. Her being ached, but her pride hurt more. With every corner she cleaned, she felt like she was erasing a fragment of her history. She was no longer the spouse of Brandon Wells. She was nobody. Days dragged. Aria commenced displaying peculiar manifestations, breathlessness, a persistent fever, and tiny tremors in her palms. Mary transported her to a community facility in the community. The physician, young and serious, examined her in quietness. "We require to conduct more complete examinations. This could be something more significant." Mary examined at him in terror. "More significant? How?" "It could be a neurological or metabolic anomaly. I don't desire to alarm you without verification, but there are indications we can't disregard." "And how much do those examinations cost?" The physician hesitated. $4,500, maybe $5,500. It all relies on what's required. Mary felt the atmosphere ripped from her respiratory system. She didn't have even $90. That evening, she didn't consume. She sold her only bracelet, the one Brandon had provided her, when he committed her a satisfactory existence. She exchanged it for 2 containers of formula and 1 pound of rice. The following day, She proceeded to the local legal assistance office, a chamber with moist partitions and accumulated documents. A young legal representative, Simone Carter, attended to her. She had dark shadows beneath her vision, but her look was sharp. She heard to Mary's narrative without interruption. I desire to compel my daughter's father to accept responsibility. Simone took notes. Do you have the birth record? Mary reduced her skull. He eliminated it. He stated that infant didn't merit his designation. Simone examined at her seriously. We're going to commence with a paternity and child maintenance lawsuit. Do you have verification you were married? Mary pulled out a torn folder. It contained a photograph from her wedding, a basic duplicate of the marriage certificate, and a couple of utility invoices in both their designations. This will function for now, but you require an official genetic examination. Mary swallowed. They already conducted one. It arrived back negative. He stated the infant wasn't his. Simone elevated her eyebrows. And are you certain you weren't with anyone else? Mary elevated her injured look. I don't recall anything. Just one evening I felt peculiar, like something wasn't correct. But I didn't commit anything. The legal representative nodded. She didn't inquire more inquiries. Some things hurt more than an examination outcome. I'm going to assist you. I don't commit miracles, but I commit justice. In the Wells estate, the atmosphere had matured heavy. The media was commencing to apply pressure. Some outlets desired to comprehend why an infant had been publicly dismissed by such an influential family. Social platforms was unforgiving. The Wells designation was becoming synonymous with controversy. Brandon, desperate to sanitize his reputation, ordered a media control operation. He purchased headlines, quieted local news outlets, and employed digital reputation specialists. But inside the dwelling, the strain couldn't be hidden. Mr. Lawrence Wells, Brandon's father, had returned from a business journey constantly sophisticated, constantly with his measured smile. He was one of those males who didn't yell, but whose single look could make an entire chamber tremble. Brandon met him in the library. Father, I require to comprehend if anyone in the family committed anything with Mary. Mr. Wells gazed at him. What are you referring to? You comprehend what I signify. She claims she wasn't with anyone. The DNA doesn't correspond me, but the physician states there's compatibility with someone proximate. Did you witness something? Mr. Wells maintained his composure. Your weakness is making you converse nonsense. Halt discovering excuses for your marital failure. That woman doesn't merit another minute of our duration. You can't disregard it. Something doesn't calculate. Kyle was here when I wasn't. The driver was excessively. Mr. Wells interrupted him in a firm tone. Don't transport your brother into this. He's just an adolescent. If you were naive enough to permit an outsider into this family, assume the consequences. From the entrance, Kyle heard in quietness. He then proceeded downstairs and discovered his mother, Mrs. Victoria, and stated in a reduced tone, Mom, do you recall Celeste? Mrs. Victoria immediately contracted. Why are you referencing that woman? Because Dad has more terrible secrets than the Mary Enterprise. You comprehend it. What he committed to Celeste was more terrible. But everyone silenced. What he committed to Aaliyah was more terrible. But everyone descended silent. Mrs. Victoria turned pale. Be silent. Don't you attempt converse about that. That narrative deceased years ago. Kyle shook his skull. No, it didn't perish. It was just buried like everything else in this dwelling. That evening, Mary transported Arya to a private facility that offered pro bono consultations. The same physician who had witnessed her at the public hospital, Dr. Hassan, attended to her. He was surprised to witness her there, but didn't state anything. After examining Arya closely, he sat across from Mary with a grave countenance. The infant has a mitochondrial disorder. It's a rare inherited anomaly. It affects cellular energy and neurological development. It's progressive. Mary felt herself faint. See, she could perish. Not if we act swift, but the treatment is costly and lengthy. How much? The physician hesitated. More than $13,500 just to commence. Mary didn't reply. She just embraced her daughter. I don't have that money. There's another option. If we discover a compatible relative, we could commence an alternative therapy. Mary examined up. a compatible relative. We require to analyze the DNA of the feasible fathers. If we discover someone with a specific genetic correspondence, we could function with that. Mary sealed her vision. She felt the universe rotate. She recalled everything: the dismissal, the desertion, the scorn. What if the only compatible individual is in a family that despises me? The physician examined at her with empathy. Then you'll have to determine whether you confront that animosity or permit the quietness consume everything. That evening, in her small chamber, Mary observed Arya while she rested. Beside her was the packet with the genetic outcomes she had requested with Simone's assistance. She unsealed it with quaking palms, examining it phrase for phrase. The outcome was not the same as the one from the hospital. The new report stated something more. There was a correspondence, but not with Brandon, with another member of the Wells family. Mary permitted the document to send. The universe proceeded dark, and for the initial moment, she felt that her narrative was merely the surface of a much deeper abyss. Because if what that document stated was accurate, then the real father of her daughter was not merely someone proximate to Brandon. He was someone who had eliminated many existences before hers. Mary permitted the packet descend to the surface without a sound. But the impact was as real as if the universe had detonated inside that small chamber. The atmosphere became dense, unbreathable. The vision of Mr. Lawrence Wells appeared in her consciousness like an aged phantom, sophisticated with that refined smile that concealed something dark, something she hadn't desired to witness. The genetic correspondence abandoned no uncertainty. It wasn't a supposition. It was data. Arya's genuine father resided behind the panoramic windows of an estate she had once contacted residents and carried the same final designation. Mary pressed Arya against her torso, as if the warmth of her being could protect her from what was approaching. She didn't weep. She didn't scream. She remained motionless, feeling a vacancy she didn't comprehend how to occupy. For the initial moment, she wasn't merely a casualty of desertion, but of the complicit quietness of an entire family. And that quietness, she comprehended now, was the most merciless adversary. That very evening, she requested a meeting with Simone, the legal representative who was assisting her. I didn't desire to accept it, but I can't remain silent anymore, she stated, positioning the packet with the outcomes on the small office surface. Simone examined it in quietness. She didn't blink. She didn't state anything for lengthy seconds. Lawrence Wells, she whispered it final. Mary nodded, her look vacant. What are you going to execute? Simone inquired. Mary didn't reply immediately, then elevated her skull. I'm going to witness Mrs. Victoria. She comprehends. She constantly comprehended. The following day, she displayed up at the estate unannounced. The entrance attendant hesitated, but witnessing her firm countenance, carrying her daughter, he permitted her traverse. She traversed across the immaculate lawn through the corridors she once traversed with aspirations until she reached the primary living chamber. Mrs. Victoria was seated having tea with her sister. Witnessing Mary, she twisted her mouth. The audacity of you to display up here after all the destruction you triggered this family. Mary was unfazed. I require to converse with you alone. Mrs. Victoria's sister stood up without stating a phrase. The strain occupied the atmosphere. The matriarch gradually positioned her teacup down on the plate. You have 6 minutes. I'm not here about your son. I'm here about yours. The other one. Mrs. Victoria blinked. The quietness rotated icy. I comprehend that the genuine father of my daughter is Lawrence. I have verification, and you comprehended it. What are you implying? She attempted to state, but Mary interrupted her. I'm not implying. I'm declaring it, and you are going to assist me because this isn't merely about me. Mrs. Victoria stood up. Her palms trembled scarcely perceptibly. You don't comprehend what you're stating. You have no concept what it signifies to accuse a male like my spouse. Mary didn't retreat, and Celeste didn't comprehend what she was executing when she screamed either. Or was she also quieted with money? Mrs. Victoria's vision flew open. That designation, that recollection that had been secured away like a corpse in the depths of her consciousness. How do you comprehend that designation? Kyle referenced it, and there's a pattern. Your spouse is not novel to this, and your quietness makes you complicit. Mrs. Victoria took a stride back, staggering. Then she sank into the armchair, as if the burden of years of secrets had crushed her. Celeste was a young woman who functioned here. One day, she vanished. They stated she departed without warning. But I comprehended it wasn't accurate. I witnessed her weep. I witnessed her bruises. I witnessed how she avoided Lawrence. I comprehended, but I was afraid. Lawrence warned me that if I communicated, he would eliminate everything. My offspring, me, and I accepted him because he constantly follows through on his threats. And that's why you permitted him to repeat the same thing with me. Mrs. Victoria bowed her skull. Quietness was her reply. That evening, Mary and Simone examined Celeste. There were no recent records, only a police report for voluntary vanishing, sealed months afterward due to absence of evidence. Simone connected to a medical database. It took hours until they discovered something. A patient designated Celeste Rodriguez. Diagnosis: unspecified psychosis. Hospitalized in a private facility outside the metropolis. A psychiatric facility, Mary stated in disbelief. Forced confinement. If she's been there ever since, she's been institutionalized for more than 5 years. This is no accident. They determined to proceed the following day. Simone made the arrangements. She used her legal representative title to gain access, though only for a superficial visit. They couldn't reveal the real explanations yet. Mary waited in the automobile. From the pain, she observed attendants, physicians, and patients traversing in circles. The location had elevated barriers and cameras on every corner. It wasn't a hospital, it was a white prison. Simone returned after an hour, her vision cloudy. She doesn't converse. She doesn't move. She's sedated all the duration. She has marks on her limbs as if she attempted to. She couldn't finish the sentence. Mary reduced her skull. The atmosphere became heavy. She's alive, but she's no longer liberated, just like me. That same week, a correspondent who had been following the situation for some duration published a filtered audio segment. It was an aged recording, undated. Without context, an anguished female tone could be heard screaming. He drugged me. I didn't desire to. I couldn't move. Please assist me. Social platforms detonated. Some stated it was fraudulent. Others pledged they recognized the tone. Simone managed to trace the origin. It was portion of a series of medical documents from the same facility where Celeste was. Someone who no longer functioned there had sold the audio for money. Mary heard to the audio 3 moments. The third moment, her blood froze cold. It was her tone. Simone comprehended it, too. She didn't state anything. She just examined at her. Brandon, in his office, heard to it for the initial moment on his device via an anonymous link. He positioned it on speaker. When he heard that scream, that fractured manner, that desperation, he felt something inside him snap. He sealed his vision, visualizing the recollection, the evening he departed for a business journey. He was proceeding overseas, and before departing, he informed his father that Mary would be alone in the dwelling. Dad was that evening alone with her. The tumbler he was holding descended to the surface and shattered. The echo of the tumbler was the same echo that resonated in his skull. And then he comprehended everything. The business journey. The evening Mary remained alone at residence. His father's insistence that everything would be satisfactory. Mary's countenance weeks afterward when something inside her had altered. The silent dismissal. The distance. The persistent sorrow. Brandon was breathing with difficulty, as if the very atmosphere was betraying him. He traversed to the bathroom, washed his countenance, examined in the mirror, and didn't recognize himself. In his reflection wasn't the sophisticated male who used to control everything with a smile. There was a betrayed son, a blind spouse, a defeated human being. He took his keys, proceeded downstairs, and traversed through the marble corridors without greeting anyone. His mother contacted him from the living chamber, but he didn't reply. He traversed the entrance to Lawrence Wells's library without knocking. The patriarch was standing, pouring himself whiskey, as if the universe owed him reverence. He examined up calmly. "You have no manners, son." Brandon sealed the entrance. The strain in the chamber was so dense it felt physical. "What did you execute to her?" Lawrence didn't reply. "I'm going to repeat it only one more moment. What did you execute to Mary?" The quietness was lengthy, arrogant. Then Lawrence took a sip from his tumbler and communicated with chilling serenity. "Everything I've provided you, I committed to tame you. You were constantly weak. Brandon, you weren't born to lead this family. You lacked character. You had too many emotions. Brandon took a quaking stride toward him. You drugged her. You contacted her when she couldn't protect herself. Is that what you committed? Don't elevate your tone. Reply me. Lawrence examined at him without flinching. She was merely another pawn. I desired to display you that you can't trust anyone. Not women, and not your judgment. And I succeeded because you failed as constantly. Brandon staggered backward as if he'd been punched in the torso. He felt sick. Repulsion. His own father had eliminated the woman he loved merely to humiliate him. You're sick. I'm in control. What's the difference? You're not in control of anything because I'm going to sink you with everything you are, with everything you represent. Lawrence released a brief, dry chuckle. And you believe individuals are going to accept you a spoiled adolescent over me. Do you comprehend how many judges are indebted to me? How many media outlets rely on my money? Brandon tightened his hands. Well, they are going to discover out everything because I will communicate. He departed. He didn't examine back, didn't hear to the threats. He struck the entrance and rushed out as if the estate had transformed into a fiery cage. When he arrived in the community where Mary resided, he didn't comprehend whether to knock or merely kneel. Mrs. Josephine unsealed the entrance with distrust. What are you executing here? I require to converse with her. She doesn't desire to witness you or hear you. And she's correct. Brandon swallowed. His tone fractured. Please, Mrs. Josephine hesitated, then stepped aside. Mary was in the chamber feeding area. Witnessing him, she stood up with the infant in her limbs, her vision occupied with contained rage. What are you executing here? Brandon took a stride, then halted. He examined different defeated. I arrived to request for your forgiveness. Your forgiveness is useless to me. Brandon, I comprehend everything now. I heard the audio. I communicated with him. He confessed what he committed to you, what he committed to me. He couldn't continue. His tone completely fractured. Mary comprehended without him requiring to state more. But she couldn't permit herself to feel empathy not yet. And now you arrive here to redeem yourself after abandoning me alone in a delivery chamber. After screaming at me before everyone. After permitting your mother to contact me as social climber. Now you feel suffering. There's no excuse for any of that. I comprehend. But I'm here because I desire to assist you. I desire to assist you and my daughter. Mary trembled. She is not your daughter. She is my daughter. Even if she doesn't bear your blood because what they committed to her is inexcusable. And I won't remain silent. Mary collapsed onto the mattress with the infant in her limbs. Weeping poured out of her like a torrent deep. Fatigued, almost powerless, Brandon attempted to near, but she elevated her palm. Don't arrive near me. I require duration. Brandon nodded. He departed without stating more. Simone, the legal representative, was preparing the complaint. She comprehended she was challenging someone powerful, but she didn't care. The document was dense. It included medical examinations, genetic examinations, the recordings, Celeste's history, and indirect testimonies. This is going to detonate, but you can't retreat, she informed Mary as they reviewed the documents. I won't. They're going to attack you. They'll state you committed it for money, for revenge, for fame. Mary examined her in the vision. I don't care what they state. I'm not executing this for me. I'm executing it for all the ones who couldn't communicate. The media discovered out. Some supported the complaint. Others ridiculed it. But the narrative commenced to gain traction. Several women commenced writing to Simone anonymously. They had functioned in the residences of powerful families. Some recounted that Lawrence Wells had also harassed them, but they were too afraid to communicate. The legal team filed the formal complaint. The media surrounded the courthouse. The photograph of Mary departing with her daughter in her limbs circulated on social platforms, in newspapers, and on television channels. Days afterward, Lawrence sent a message. He desired to converse with Mary privately. Simone forbade it, but Mary determined to proceed. They met at a private restaurant. He arrived with his usual sophistication. She arrived with a serene but firm countenance. You have audacity, he stated. I have recollection, and I have a daughter who merits justice. That infant is not my protection. She is my engine and the reflection of what you committed. Like it or not, she is in your existence forever now. Lawrence examined at her for a lengthy duration, then smiled. I can transport the infant away from you. I have the resources, the contacts, the legal representatives. With a couple of signatures, I can obtain custody. I can argue that you have no means, that you have emotional instability. Do you genuinely desire to participate this game? Mary didn't flinch. Attempt it, but I pledge that if you execute, I will make public every detail, every casualty, every audio. You won't be able to traverse down the avenue without individuals examining at you as what you are. Lawrence picked up his tumbler, drank, then stood up without stating more. Brandon contacted a media conference. Simone, Mary, and other media outlets were present. Microphones, cameras, correspondents. The universe was observing. Brandon stepped up to the platform, inhaled deeply, and communicated. I arrived to communicate as a son, as a spouse, and as a casualty of quietness. The father of my spouse's daughter is my own father, and it is not the initial moment he has committed this. What occurred to Mary was an act of violence, of power, of perversion, and I, as portion of that family, can no longer remain silent. There was a collective murmur, shouts, camera flashes. What occurred to Mary was an act of violence, of power, of perversion, and I, as portion of that family, can no longer remain silent. The media detonated. Social platforms collapsed. Lawrence Wells's untouchable figure ceased to exist. And just like that, the quietness was fractured. Brandon's phrases still reverberated in the courthouse corridors, in the newsrooms, and on internet forums like a device no one witnessed approaching. The vision of the successor to one of the nation's most powerful families confessing that his father had committed an unimaginable crime, and that the infant he himself had dismissed was the outcome of that monstrosity traversed borders. It was international news. Front pages, headlines, separated reactions. Some applauded his audacity. Others contacted him a coward for having been silent for so lengthy. But Mary had no duration to debate the media impact. She was focused on only one thing: justice. Together with Simone, her legal representative, she presented herself before the district legal representative's office, accompanied by cameras, correspondents, and several women who had also suffered but hadn't attempted to communicate until now. Mary carried area in her limbs as constantly. She was thinner, her countenance marked by fatigue, but her vision were an illumination. She was no longer afraid. She no longer concealed. Simone filed the formal complaint against Lawrence Wells with all the legal backing feasible. She included testimonies, documents, the genetic outcomes, the filtered audio, and the recording of the confession Brandon had secretly obtained days earlier while conversing with his father. The evidence was transparent. Although the regulations sometimes bent to protect the powerful, this moment they were going to compel it to examine the reality in the countenance. The media conference was contacted at the courthouse entrance. Simone took the microphone while Mary cradled area. Today we are not only denouncing a crime, we are denouncing a structure of impunity that has protected a male for decades. A male capable of eliminating entire existences with a smile. We will not be silent. We will not retreat. When Mary took the floor, the quietness was absolute. For years, I accepted I had committed something incorrect, that I merited the dismissal, the stares, the sealed entrances. But it was not my fault. And today, I desire other women to hear this. It was not your fault either. He didn't merely steal an existence from me. He stole the possibility of being a mother with pride. But he will not transport away my strength. That same day, Simone presented a list of women willing to testify. Some were still afraid. Others didn't desire to display their countenances. But the narratives matched. Repeated patterns, peculiar invitations, vertigo, recollection blanks, confused awakenings, months of quietness, all connected to Lawrence Wells, all rendered invisible by power. And then the unexpected occurred. Celeste appeared not as the cheerful young woman who had once functioned at the estate, but as a fragile figure with a pale countenance, brief hair, and quaking palms. She had escaped the psychiatric hospital with the assistance of an attendant who determined not to remain complicit. Simone received her in her residence, provided her clean garments, and protected her as if she were her own sister. Mary embraced her with moisture in her vision. Celeste didn't communicate for a lengthy duration, but when she finally executed, her tone fractured but firm made everything tremble. He secured me up so no one would comprehend. He informed me that no one would accept me, that I was insane, and I commenced to accept him until I witnessed Mary on the news and comprehended that he maintained eliminating existences. With Celeste as a key witness, the prosecutor's office ordered Lawrence's immediate arrest. The police arrived at his estate with cameras rolling live. They transported him out in handcuffs, wearing dark glasses and an atmosphere of absolute scorn. He didn't resist. He examined at the correspondence as if they were insects. Still, the instant was historic. A Wells publicly arrested. But it didn't endure. 72 hours afterward, he was released due to a legal technicality, alleged insufficient direct evidence. The presiding judge was an aged acquaintance of Lawrence Wells. Social platforms detonated. Public perspective was separated between outrage and disbelief. Brandon screamed to the cameras that the system was corrupt, that if his father traversed liberated, no one would be safe. Mary felt like the universe was chuckling in her countenance again. But this moment, she didn't fracture down. She organized a march with Simone and the other casualties. They didn't desire only judicial justice. They desired social justice. They desired the entire nation to examine at that monster with his countenance uncovered. The march was contacted for the following Sunday. Women, mothers, daughters, activists, correspondents, artists, thousands joined. Banners with sharp phrases, photographs of casualties, designations that had been in the phantoms for years. Mary marched at the front with area in her limbs. She traversed with moisture in her vision, but without reducing her skull. The impact was immediate. Television networks broadcasted live. Several public figures communicated out. Local governments displayed their support. For the initial moment, Lawrence couldn't manipulate the narrative. Individuals didn't accept him. Social platforms wouldn't be silent. The nation was awake. But while the universe observed, area worsened. The fever wouldn't descend. Her being was weakening. She wouldn't consume. Mary rushed to the nearest hospital. Dr. Hassan received her. We require to operate immediately. How urgent? Hours. If we don't intervene, there could be irreversible destruction. I don't have the money. I only have $180 remaining. That's it. The physician examined at her with empathy. Then obtain it any method you can. Mary ran out. She searched for Simone. They searched for foundations. None could reply so rapidly. The hospital required a minimum deposit of $11,000. Desperate, Mary recorded a video. She didn't request for money. She merely informed the narrative. She displayed area, clarified the urgency, and published it on social platforms. Within hours, individuals reacted. Anonymous individuals, celebrities, artists, mothers, students. A wave of solidarity activated. The narrative was already too well recognized. They couldn't permit Area to compensate with her existence for what another male had committed. The campaign proceeded viral. In less than 24 hours, the account elevated more than $65,000. Brandon, upon hearing the news, sold his stake in a technology company he had founded years ago. He handed over the money without announcing it, without cameras, without pretense. Execute what you have to execute, he informed Simone. I merely desire the infant to be well. Mary, upon discovering out, didn't state anything. She remained silent. But there was something novel in her vision, not trust, not love, gratitude. The operation was a success. Area replied well. Physicians reported that with continuous treatment, she could lead a stable existence. It wouldn't be simple, but there was anticipation. That evening, Mary descended asleep in the hospital chair with Area's palm in hers. She dreamed of a quiet dwelling, of chuckling, of a basic existence. For the initial moment, she dreamed without terror. But the monster hadn't vanished. Lawrence, since his release, had been pulling strings. He comprehended his duration was running out, that the pressure was increasing, that the system no longer had his back as before. He organized his escape. He obtained fraudulent documents, a land route to another nation, private bodyguards. He planned everything with surgical precision. It was his style to execute everything in quietness, without commotion, without abandoning traces. What he didn't comprehend was that his own son, Brandon, had positioned a private examiner behind him. They were tracking his movements, waiting for the precise instant to intervene. The alert reached Simone. Simone contacted Mary. Mary contacted the police. The plan was basic. Lawrence would depart the nation that evening. He would fly abroad using a fraudulent identity. The airport was the key point. They had to act there 1 hour before boarding. Mary didn't hesitate. She took a cab and proceeded to Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport. She didn't notify the media. She didn't seek a spectacle, only justice. She discovered him in the VIP line with a fraudulent passport and 2 bodyguards. She examined at him. He examined at her. "You," he stated with arrogance. Mary didn't reply. She rotated around, and then 2 police officers, a judge, and a prosecutor arrived. Lawrence Wells was formally detained for attempted flight, document fraud, and violation of conditional release. "You won't obtain out so simply this moment." He smiled one final moment. "The universe is full of traitors." Mary gazed at him. "No, it is full of women who halted being afraid." And just like that, the monster descended. Lawrence Wells was handcuffed before cameras, surrounded by security agents and witnesses of his downfall. His look, for the initial moment, was no longer arrogant. It was vacant. No power protected him anymore. His universe, built on terror, manipulation, and quietness, collapsed with the strength of a reality he couldn't crush. The entire nation observed, some with disbelief, others with relief, many with rage. It was the conclusion of an era where the powerful could trample others without consequences. Justice was finally traversing without being sold. The trial was lengthy, public, and televised. Dozens of witnesses, experts, physicians, psychologists, correspondents, women. Tones that had been buried for years arrived to illumination with the trembling of those who don't comprehend if they will be accepted, but with the audacity of those who can no longer remain silent. Among them, Celeste. Her testimony paralyzed the chamber. She communicated with a shaky but transparent tone. She described the torment with details no one could disregard. Every phrase was a slap to the system. Mary also testified. She cradled Aria in her limbs as she communicated. She didn't dramatize. She didn't weep. She communicated as a mother who was no longer afraid. She informed everything from the day she woke confused to the instant she heard the audio where her own tone was imploring for assistance. She recounted how the Wells family accused her, deserted her, and degraded her. She examined at every judge, every legal representative. She didn't request for empathy. She required justice. The verdict arrived after weeks of deliberation. Lawrence Wells was declared guilty of multiple felonies including aggravated assault, coercion, evidence tampering, fraud, and attempted flight. The sentence was transparent: existence imprisonment without possibility of parole. The nation celebrated. Some tones still doubted, influenced by decades of media power. But the majority comprehended that something had altered, that it was no longer feasible to remain silent when a single casualty determined to communicate. Candles were ignited in public squares. Scarves were suspended on balconies. Mary wasn't the only one who won. Everyone won. Aria, meanwhile, was recovering. The operation had been successful. Her tiny being replied well to treatment. The physicians were optimistic. Brandon visited her every day. He didn't converse much. Sometimes he merely sat beside her, took her tiny palm, and observed her rest. It was his method of requesting for forgiveness, not with phrases, but with presence. Mary noticed it. She also noticed that he was no longer the same. The arrogant, distant, controlling Brandon of the estate had vanished. What remained was a male who was fractured but willing to rebuild himself from the ruins. One morning, when Aria was about to be released, Brandon requested to converse with her alone. They sat on a bench facing the hospital garden. The atmosphere smelled of moist earth and forgotten flowers. "I comprehend I can never erase what I committed to you," he stated, examining downward. "You can't," Mary replied firmly. "But I desire you to comprehend that I'm not departing. Not as a couple. I'm not here to obtain that back, but as someone who comprehends the destruction he triggered and is willing to exist with the burden of that destruction for the remainder of his existence." Mary observed him for a lengthy duration, then exhaled. Sometimes forgiving is permitting proceed, and I don't desire to carry you anymore, not out of animosity, but because I desire to traverse lightly. He nodded. He didn't insist, and she embraced him briefly like someone stating goodbye to something that was significant but no longer belongs. With Aria's health stabilized and Lawrence's sentence final, Mary determined it was duration to execute something more. She couldn't permit her narrative to become merely another situation that duration erases. She had to inform it not for herself, but for those who couldn't. She commenced writing at initial on loose sheets of document. Then Simone provided her a hardcover notebook. Occupy it with what fractured you, and also with what saved. Mary titled the manuscript with the designation that had accompanied her since the initial moment she felt something was incorrect. The Daughter of Shadows. The book was published 6 months afterward. It was edited by a small independent Blackhound Media. At initial, they didn't anticipate much impact, but on the day of its launch, Mary's designation trended everywhere. The book sold out in a few hours. Reviews contacted it audacious, necessary, heartbreaking. It wasn't a narrative written to move individuals. It was a warning, a testimony, an act of remembrance. With the royalties, Mary founded an organization for women casualties of abuse and power violence. She contacted it the Area Foundation not merely for the infant, but for what she represented, an existence born from terror that became a symbol of anticipation. It offered free legal assistance, emotional recovery workshops, temporary shelter, and medical guidance. Women arrived from everywhere fearful, injured, but with the certainty that they were no longer alone. Celeste was one of the initial volunteers. Simone became her legal ally. Mrs. Josephine became a type of honorary godmother. Brandon collaborated silently organizing donations, using his contacts without seeking the spotlight. Mary became a public figure, despite not desiring to. She was invited to conferences, universities, and television displays, but she only accepted when she comprehended she could converse with sincerity without cosmetics, without prefabricated speeches. Her narrative wasn't a product. It was an open injury that she had determined not to conceal anymore. Years dragged. Aria matured surrounded by affection. She didn't inquire much at initial. She was a curious, joyful infant with a contagious chuckle and a precocious intelligence. She comprehended her narrative was special, that her mother was resilient, and that somehow her existence had altered the existences of many individuals. When she turned 7, Mary wrote her a correspondence. My dearest daughter, you were born in quietness, but your tone has woken the universe. I didn't elevate you to be audacious, because you already are. I elevated you to be liberated, to comprehend that your origin doesn't define you. What defines you is the affection you provided and received. And you, Aria, have been my greatest lesson in affection. The final scene took location on a warm April afternoon. The sky was a transparent, almost unreal blue. Mary traversed along a path surrounded by trees with Aria in her limbs. She was no longer an infant, but she liked to embrace her like when she was tiny. Mary elevated her, propped her on her hip, and examined at the sky. She didn't state anything for several seconds. Aria caressed her countenance. Are you satisfactory, Mom? She smiled not with sorrow, but with peace. The suffering fractured me, but you rebuilt me. And they maintained traversing.